ride you like a horsey!
G'day guys, Will from Rosebud Mowers. We're back with another educational video, and today's video is all about how to clean the carburetor on your push mower. We've got up on the top of the toolbox here a Honda, which is going to be the most common type of contractor engine. So bear with me for a second. We're going to grab some tools out, rip this carburetor off, and then show you guys how to clean it. Okay guys, so we're ready to take the carburetor off our Honda. At this stage, all we're going to need is a ratchet with a 10mm on it. You can just use a spanner as well. So start off by taking the two wing nuts off the top of your air filter. My hands have never been so coordinated in my entire life, getting these two off. Chuck them to the side, and you'll simply be able to just remove your air filter cover. Take your air filter out, and given how dusty that one is, throw it in the bin. Okay, once we're at this stage, we can then go ahead and take off the two 10mm nuts on the face of the carburetor, and then another 10mm hiding up here, holding the air filter housing and the fuel tank in. It's lucky I'm so strong. Once we've backed off the two 10mm, and after you lose one temporarily, you're going to take off your air filter. Oh God. And of course, you'll miss another 10mm hiding under here, just like the professional person that I am, who does this about 20 times a week, should remember. Okay, air filter housing should come straight off, and your little sump breather hose will just be behind there, which you can just disconnect from the back of the air filter housing. Righto, first things first, what we're going to do is check the orientation of how our linkages go together. It is a good opportunity, if you guys are not familiar with this, is just grab your phone out and then just take a photo of it, so we make sure we know how everything sits and goes back together once we've cleaned our carburetor. So this particular carburetor, it should just pop straight off now, being careful that we don't lose a little spacer there. Okay, first things first, we're going to grab some needle nose pliers and a fuel hose clamp so we can turn off our fuel. If you haven't got a fuel hose clamp, you can just drain your fuel tank as well. So bear with me a sec, I'll grab some needle nose pliers and a fuel hose clamp, and then we'll cut to the next clip. Okay guys, so I have disconnected my fuel line. I've got my fuel hose clamp on here, and I just used a set of needle nose pliers to slide the fuel line back. Now, this is where a few people do get unstuck, because the linkages will sort of stop you from sliding this carburetor all the way back off. So you're going to bring it out all the way until it's just about to slide off the studs that go into the engine, and you'll be able to remove the governor rod and then the spring. I do find it easier just to remove the spring with a pair of needle nosies, being very careful. Pop the linkage to the side, and the rest of the carburetor should come straight off. It is going to fight you just a little bit. Just use slight pressure, and then the linkage will pop itself off just like so. And again, pop this down, and you've got that photo that you took for later to remember how that linkage goes back on. So this is your carburetor. Now this is the thing that supplies sweet fuel and air mixture to your engine to give it life. Now, what reason would we have to be cleaning this carburetor? Well, first of all, a little bit of water can get into your fuel. It can oxidize the fuel bowl, rust out the fuel bowl, causing the main jet to get blocked. And this can present itself in all sorts of ways, like hunting issues, choking issues, all these sort of different common reasons why you'd clean your carby, and hard starting as well. Honda carburetors are generally known for having a lot more issues than others, I do find. The biggest reason that I do find is the type of float bowl Honda use. versus a Kohler engine. A Kohler engine will use a full aluminium bodied carburetor with an aluminium float bowl. For some reason, Honda use an aluminium bodied carburetor with a metal float bowl. Now we find if you get any sort of water contamination into these, they will rust out, block your main jet and cause a whole bunch of grief. So we'll show you how to give this a good clean. The first step to cleaning a carburetor is using just a bit of carburetor clean or a bit of solvent. You can use acetone with a brush as well. You can buy this on mowermerch.com.au. It's an awesome product to have to help clean the carburetors. You can spray this liberally all over the carburetor, and if you have compressed air, of course, that will help a lot more as well. So we're going to go set ourselves up over on the workbench now, where we can lay out a rag and pull this carby right apart for you guys and see an exploded view. Alrighty guys, so what we've done is moved over to the workbench now. We've got a stainless steel workbench here. I like to put down a rag to prevent bouncing of any parts, small parts you may lose, like the needle and seat. So I find just putting a rag down, it helps me see the parts a lot easier, and it's a good little tip and trick for you guys. So, again with our 10mm, we're going to take off the float bowl. Oh my god, it's so tight. Oh, why? Okay, tighter than what it needed to be. We're going to take off the 10mm out of the bottom of the float bowl, making sure when we do take this off that our washer on the bottom is still in good condition, otherwise we can replace that. Now we don't want that to be perished for any reason, because then the float bowl will leak fuel. Pop that to the side. Alright, float bowl should come off nicely, being careful to keep our O-ring nicely intact. Okay. So inside the carburetor, we have a float bowl. This part here is your float bowl. This is what meters the fuel going into the carburetor. So in through your fuel inlet here, when this is in the down position, it is going to let fuel in to fill the carburetor. As you can see, it is going down now naturally because there's no fuel in there. Once the float bowl is full, it will float upwards, blocking the needle and seat, which lies just in this part of the carburetor here. So, as part of a carby clean, what we're going to do is take out this very small rod here, pop it to the side, take off your float bowl, pop it to the side, and then we'll continue in to now check out the main jet in the bottom of the carburetor. Okay? So bear with me, I'll grab a screwdriver and we'll continue to pull this carburetor down. Okay guys, so we're back here with our carburetor now, and we've got to take out our main jet, which lies down in this tube. Now it is quite picky on what size flathead screwdriver you can get in there, so be gentle because you can get all the way to this point and just completely strip out your main jet. So take your time and be careful with this part. So we're just going to take out that main jet until it stops screwing out. Okay, if it falls out, awesome. Sometimes they don't. What we can do is we can push through the carburetor and push through our emulsion tube. Sometimes they are incredibly stubborn and don't want to come out at all. Gotcha. Alright, so just again, be patient, and you can push through that emulsion tube from the top, making sure you're being nice and careful. Now, they are the two main components with a Honda carburetor to cause misrunning. That emulsion tube will block up quite easily. As you can see, there's very small holes in there, and they get sort of blocked up with a bit of crud and crap. Your mower will run really poorly, be hard to start, and just not have the correct amount of power. So we'll pop them to the side and keep stripping out the carburetor. The next part here, we need to take out our idle screw. So you're going to back that all the way out. And again, pop that off to the side. We did take a photo of the top of the carby earlier, so we know how far that needs to go back in. And just with your flathead screwdriver, you're just going to gently, and again, take your time, change to a smaller flathead if you need to. And again, depending on how long these carbies have been together for, if they've ever been apart, they can be really stubborn to get out. And I am just going to take my time and work my way around it, because the last thing I want to do is break it. Come on, you stubborn bugger. Gotcha. Righto. Awesome. have a good look at it. Okay, so there is, all in all, the main components to a carburetor. Okay, all laid out. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go through and we're going to clean each component and make sure there's no rust, corrosion, you know, bits of dirt stuck in any of the different components like the emulsion tube and the main jet, and making sure, you know, inside our carby is nice and clean, inside our seat there is nice and clean. Make sure everything is free of debris, and as you can see, I did give this a good clean down with our carburetor clean before, and they do come up like new. Making sure that our float bowl has no corrosion and no rust in it, which it doesn't, and it looks really good. Nice and clean. I'm happy with that. I will reuse that. So we sell these cleaning kits on mowermerch.com.au. They come with every size tuning screwdriver you need for your two-stroke equipment, but they also come with all these little brushes and probes. Okay, so they're awesome for cleaning different components. Now you can also, in a pickle, drop down to somewhere like Total Tools or Sydney Tools, and you can buy these little tip cleaners. These are for welders, and actually are used to clean the tips on any of your MIG welders. But I actually find them really handy to clean out different components on a carburetor. And again, they cost a couple of bucks from any of your tool shops, maybe 10 or 15 bucks. So what I'll start to do is I will just start to go through each individual hole on my emulsion tube here, making sure that they are nice and clean. And again, this does take a couple of minutes just to make sure that everything is free of debris and nice and clean. So I'll go through the whole emulsion tube here and make sure it's all clean. And okay, I'll change size. I'll go back through the top, make sure that's nice and clean. And I'll give that a really good rinse out with carburetor clean, making sure, from what I can see, is a really good spray pattern through each of those different components. Each of those different holes is nice and clean. Looks good. I'll put that to the side, ready to reinstall into the carburetor. Okay, then I can change up to my main jet here, where I can get my different size tip cleaners here. And you want to make sure you don't oversize these main jets, because if you do, it will make your engine run rich. So we're just going to give it a good clean, make sure there's nothing in there. Again, bit of carby clean, making sure we've got a good spray pattern out the bottom, and then pop it to the side. I'll repeat this process with pretty much everything, making sure that everything is nice and clean. This little part here, we want to make sure that O-ring on the bottom is nicely intact. Once everything's nice and clean, we'll pop it all to the side. We're going to check our needle and seat and our float bowl, making sure it's free of debris, nice and clean. The little needle here is not perished whatsoever and happy to reuse. We're going to then go into the same process here with our carburetor and just give it a good blowout with carburetor clean on all the different components. Make sure everything's nice and free. Our fuel tap, nice and free. If your carburetor is flowing correctly, I wouldn't bother touching inside the fuel tap. So we won't touch base on that on this video, because 9 times out of 10 you really never have to open that up. It is just a carburetor related issue internally. So what I'll do now that I've got it all cleaned down and I'm happy for it to go back together, I'll give it a really good wash down with carburetor clean and an air gun, and then reassemble it. And we're back. So I have given everything a really good blow down and clean out with carburetor clean. Just going to clean a couple of other little components with my brushes, just to make sure that there's no corrosion inside this tube here, because it does make it challenging to get the main jet and the emulsion tube out next time. Just making sure it is all generally nice and clean, and I am happy with it. No crud or gunk left in there. Okay, we're going to start to reassemble this carburetor now. First of all, tube goes straight in. Main jet, straight in. Give it a bit of a tap until it finds its place, and then screw it down. We don't need to tighten the absolute buggery out of this main jet, because again, it's only going to make it harder to get out next time. Just nice and snug. Okay, fit up our float bowl and our needle. Straight back in. And our little rod that holds our float bowl in. Oh my god, I can't find the hole. This is a problem. Oh my god. I got this. I am a professional, people. I'm starting to question my life that I need glasses or not, because sometimes I really struggle with little things like this. Okay, once that's in, double check it. We're going to make sure it moves upwards and downwards. Now, here's the trick. Before you get too far, what we're going to do is we're going to blow through our fuel inlet, making sure that our float bowl and our needle and seat is closing off. So we're going to blow through. Nothing blew through, which means our needle is sealing, and we're going to hold the float bowl down now. And fuel is coming through. Hold it up again. Nothing through. Righto, I'm happy to now put the float bowl back on. Our O-ring is still in really good shape. What I generally do with these O-rings is just to make them a lot easier to get back in without pinching. I just coat them in a bit of inox, just to make sure that when our float bowl goes back on, it doesn't pinch it or, you know, twist it in place. So what I will do is just seat it back on there. Now, a really awesome trick for these O-rings, if you find that they have expanded and they are becoming a huge pain to get back in, you can actually pop them in the freezer for about half an hour and it will actually shrink the O-ring. So see how mine's really expanded there, and it's going to cause me a ton of grief to get it back in. I find in this time, if I really have trouble getting it back in, and it's just going to be a pain in the ass, I'll just chuck a new O-ring in there. If you obviously don't have another O-ring, you know, you can just chuck it in the freezer. This one's sort of battling me a little bit, so I'm probably just going to go grab a new O-ring at this stage. I don't want to go back in there. Throw it in the bin. Or in the freezer. I'll go get another O-ring. Alright, after I yeeted the O-ring away, I went and got another one, and perfect fit. Again, if you don't have access to another O-ring, just chuck yours in the freezer. I'm just really impatient and didn't want to wait for that. So once my O-ring is back in, and I did spray a bit more inox on that just to make sure it's going to seat nicely, I am going to put my float bowl back on. Now, really important, you'll see a little 10mm bolt on one side of the carburetor, making sure that places in the outwards position. That is a drain hole. Okay, and you want to be able to access that from the front of the carburetor. Chuck my float bowl bolt back on, and I usually just give it a bit of a twist just to make sure that O-ring's nicely seated, just to prevent any fuel leakage. Grab my ratchet and then tighten that back on, just like so. Carburetor pretty much done on the bottom side. We're then going to double check everything's nice and clean. Pop it back in. Make sure that's seated. Oh, there we go. In nice and tight. Chuck our idle screw back in. And again, because we took that photo before, we know exactly where to put it. Just like so. Bump that bad boy all the way in. Alright, let's chuck this bad boy back on the mower.
Let's do it.
So we're back over here at the mower. We're going to chuck this carburetor back on, and anytime I do a carburetor clean, I always rev check the engine, reset the choke, and idle. So you're pretty much just going to do the reverse of how it all came off. And again, if you don't remember, you'll have that photo that you took on your phone to help you get guided to get everything back on nice and correctly. If you didn't take that photo, then I guess just watch the video again. Yeah, man. All right. Little needle noses, huh? Oh, goodness me. I'm always really scared that I'm going to pull on this spring and then I'm going to let it go and then it's going to like jam me in the finger and hurt me. So be careful of that, maybe. Sometimes I feel like trying to get the right camera angle makes me do things really difficultly. Okay, slide it back. Chuck your fuel line back on. Righto, take your fuel hose clamp off, and before you put this thing back together, check for leaks, because now's the perfect time. You don't want to have this all back together, all the covers back on, and all of a sudden you see a drip of fuel coming out the bottom of the float bowl. Really sucks when that happens. So take my advice, turn the fuel on now, make sure it ain't gonna drip, 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 drip. All right, and we're back. So we've got the carburetor back on and all put back together. Okay, we're gonna chuck our air filter cover back on, our throttle cable back on, and in part 2, we'll show you how to reset your throttle cable, adjust your choke, and adjust your maximum RPM with a tacho. Have a great day, guys. If you need any of the parts we talked about in this video today, hit up mowermerch.com.au. It's Will from Rosebud Mowers. Have a ripper day. You'll spin me right round, baby, right